Hi, my name is Trevor Fall. I'm the acting president of TESL Manitoba, and we're going to be continuing to talk about your personal finances, whether it's a paradise island that you're headed to or a shipwreck. And so, as we begin, we'd like to have a land acknowledgement. We are located on the lands of the Anishinaabe and Innuwak, Anishinaabe, Nakota, and Dene, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. We recognize and honor Treaty 3 territory, the Shoal Lake 40 First Nation, the source of Winnipeg's clean drinking water. So as we go through our discussion today, I just want to review a couple of ideas and concepts that we talked about last week. So the premise is based on our current financial situation. As I explained briefly in our last session, I was a financial planner for 5 years initially, although that was almost 15 years ago that I stepped away from that and went back into teaching English as a second language. But since then, I've also helped many, many newcomers and teachers with their finances. So these are some statistics that actually were better uh, 10, 15, 20 years, and it's been getting progressively worse over time. So currently, this was in 2023, 2024, 51% of Canadians say their financial situation is good, but 47% in the same survey say they're living paycheck to paycheck. So you could say, well, there's 51% that are good and 47 that are living paycheck to paycheck. But the reality is there's an overlap with these numbers. And I put in there who is lying. It's not necessarily that someone is lying, but the reality of the situation is we know that um, many, many people are living paycheck to paycheck. And I think they're saying their financial situation is good, even though they're living paycheck to paycheck because they've gotten used to that type of lifestyle and they just think, okay, well, this is normal. And that's unfortunate because we should be moving from low income to middle income and then middle income to high income or more passive income as our financial IQ increases. And even as we get older, generally, our knowledge, our job responsibilities, positions usually increase in better financial gain. But we know that that's not happening. And as I shared last week, there's about 35% of seniors who are age 50 or 55 or 60 or older that are ready for retirement, but that means 2/3 or 65% of Canadians say that they're not ready for retirement. They don't have the finances in place, or they fear that they're going to have to keep working past the age that they're wanting to retire. So that's the premise I'm working off of. I know, especially for newcomers and for us as English teachers that are in contract situations, that there can be a lot of um, concern, worry, fear over money. And that's where last week we talked of multiple ways to be increasing your income. Today, we're going to talk about some ways to be decreasing your expenses. So yeah, these were just some of the statistics that I mentioned. And I'm curious for yourself, you don't have to answer this out loud, but are you on track to retire with money? I talked last week also about different types of boats. You can apply this to any types of land or water vehicles, but some people are walking or paddling in a raft or in a kayak, whereas others are using, maybe pedal power on a boat or a bicycle or a tricycle, and then others are using engines that are, or wind power, electrical power, and then engines to, depending on which vehicle you're in, that will determine how much you're able to steer, how hard you have to work, and how fast you'll get to your destination, or at least the comfort level you'll be in. I know for me, for many years, I was just paddling, and it was very frustrating, very tiring. The last 7 to 10 years, I've been managing my money much better and been able to um, have a lifestyle where I'm not wealthy yet, but I'm comfortably middle class, and we have flexibility and options to travel. And then we'll see over the next 5 to 10 years um, where my financial knowledge brings me to a place. My goal is to have enough passive income, not to stop working, but to then dedicate or devote more time for helping people. So I may still be helping people and making money, but I'm not being forced to work. And right now I'm in a situation where I don't have to work. Um, I shouldn't say it that way. I'm in a situation where I can choose where I work. Whereas 5, 10, 15 years ago, I had so many bills and no money in the bank and credit card debt and things that were piling on. I just had to take any job that was out there. And so now I have a little bit more flexibility and comfort level. And we'll see some of the strategies I've used and others have used to decrease expenses, which has helped me immensely in these areas. Okay. So I'm just going to jump through a bunch of those questions from last week. And so just as a quick review, you can be getting a second job. That's usually the least attractive option just because it's meaning that you're working harder, often low pay, or even if the pay is decent, but your taxes are definitely higher. You can increase positions within your company horizontally or the place where you're teaching, or vertically by taking on different responsibilities and becoming more in a manager. Now with AI, another way to increase your income is just be more efficient. So it means that you're spending less time doing the same jobs, especially for us as teachers with preparation and with marking. If we can use different tools that are available to help make those parts of our job faster, then we have better energy, better results to give to our students and more energy to give to our students as well as the people around us. And then, of course, I talked and we'll look at some of the benefits of decreasing expenses by starting a business and also involved in real estate. And I mentioned last week, most people think of real estate and say, well, I don't want to own a bunch of properties and, fix toilets at midnight. Well, I don't think there's anyone that really wants to do that, but you don't have to. You can be investing in different types of real estate. For example, you can do rent to owns where the person renting to own that house is responsible for repairs that are $500 or less. So they're not calling you for a clogged toilet or for minor repairs, just if there's a furnace or roof issue or major-ish things. You could be loaning money at 8 or 10 or 12% as a second mortgage. And again, some people say that's risky. Risk can be mitigated or managed if you're working through mortgage brokers, private lenders. You can invest in a REIT, real estate investment trust, that can also be getting you higher than average or at least above minimum interest rates. So, and of course, then you could be buying, renovating property or buying and holding property for the longer term. The key is how will you start and who's going to help you to analyze what are the best ways for you to start increasing your income. So we're going to look at some of the common expenses that everyone has. And so taxes, of course, is one, and I put it first, but it's actually the last one people think about. They're usually not thinking of their taxes. They're thinking more about, okay, well, I have my food expenses, I have my rent and mortgage, transportation, so vehicle, bus, etc. I have my debt payments, and even that's one that people don't realize how much money is siphoned off of their accounts from their debts. And that's where, when I was in debt and as I was learning how to help other people get out of debt, most people are spending $200, $300, $500 a month in interest payments on credit cards, lines of credit, outside of their mortgage, outside of the other expenses they have. And so the company that I was working with at that time was called Debt Freedom Canada. And on average, we were able to rearrange people's budgets and not drastically reduce and cut spending, but we were able to rearrange their budgets of where their money was going and very quickly free up 300 to 500, in some cases $700 to $800, just by looking at where they're spending and then identifying how they can move that money and pay less interest to credit card companies and free up some of that money for their own pocket, etc. So the biggest question is, okay, we have these expenses, how do we decrease them? So let's look at decreasing taxes. Now, before I get into a lot of detail here, I want to note that's at the bottom of the screen. Always, 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 always consult the CRA, tax accountants, tax specialists. I am not a certified tax accountant or specialist or lawyer. But I am someone who has helped many, many people get out of debt and used different principles and different philosophies in my own personal life. So I have knowledge of some of these areas. I'm going to give some general concepts, but always consult with professionals when making your decisions. But what are ways to decrease your taxes? And no, not paying them is not one of the ways. So one of the biggest ways that we can, not biggest, but one of the ways is to contribute to RRSPs, registered retirement savings plans. And so you're not actually reducing you're reducing the immediate taxes, but you're postponing when you do pay those taxes. Philosophy behind it is that when you're retired, you're going to have less income, and so you'll be able to withdraw that money at a lower tax rate. My personal opinion, I do not invest in RRSPs because I plan to have more income as I'm older through business and real estate, not less. But that's something that you have to look at and decide. You know that you can be donating to charity and having some of that, not a huge amount. But I know in our situation, even last year, we had donated several $1,000s to charity, and I was surprised because I had forgot to include it, and we were initially supposed to be paying money between my wife and I. But once I included the charity amount, I was surprised at how that reduced the taxes owed by over $1,500 in our case. So again, consult professionals. Here's something to think about that most people have never even heard of. And I'm giving you the CRA website, Canada Revenue Agency website, because they themselves explain this option. But for many of us, we're so excited and happy. Oh, it's April or May, and I got this tax refund, $2,000, $4,000, $5,000. Let's take a vacation. Well, that's an option, but that's not your best use of money. And what's better, because many people, as we saw earlier, 47% are living paycheck to paycheck. They don't have an extra $200 or $400 or $500 that's just sitting around. Well, what it means when you look at and getting a tax refund is every month or every couple of weeks, the employer has taken off money from your paycheck, sent it to the government. It's been accumulating and gathering interest in their pockets for those months. And then they realize and say, oh, we're so sorry in March, April. Sorry, not sorry, but we have this money that's actually yours. We're going to give it back to you. That's really what's happening when you get a tax refund. And so let's just say, for example, it's $2,400. That means, and if you see over several years, you're always paying $2,000, $2,500, $3,000. You can fill out a form and have your employer reduce the taxes they're taking, and then that money can be in your pocket for your needs during those months, rather than just getting it at the end of the year. And a way to decrease expenses is to have a side business. Now, I mentioned this as a way to increase your income, but it actually works in both areas. And so we're going to look at a few examples but as I get income from a business, obviously I'm increasing my income, but my expenses for that business, whether I'm self-employed or just a side hustle, there are benefits to reduce some of my regular expenses. So I think, though, before you're just like, okay, let's start a business, what kind of business can I have? Well, nowadays with our cell phones and with apps and technology and everything else, eh, like I sit down with students in my class or with teachers, I can come up with 10, 12, 15 ideas for any person based on their interests, likes, and what could be making them money. Um, and things where you don't need a lot of money to start. I'm not going to go into details. This is a whole workshop on its own of several hours, but think about what you enjoy and have skills or knowledge and what you can be doing. And, even it's as simple as putting a sign up and walking dogs or house sitting for animals in your neighborhood. Um, I sometimes offer for a very low cost to mow our neighbor's lawn. Like I was doing it for $10 an hour. She said a company would have charged her $50 per cutting. And it didn't take me that long to do. Another example was someone had a two-story house and they said that they were quoted between $300 and $500 to clean the eaves troughs. And I went up to the first level and noticed it was full. I then went to the second level and just looked very quickly. The top just needed a hose in and sprayed down, and just because there was just a little bit of debris. So I know the companies were charging that much because they have overhead and different things, but um, you can get insurance for as low as $800 to $1,000 per year and be fully covered, and then you also reduce your risks by just tell, if you're advertising your neighborhood, just say I don't do two-story built houses, or the second story I'm not climbing on, but I will be spraying down to get them clean, and then you take before and after pictures. Anyway, the long and the short of it is I didn't even touch the second floor for her. Um, because I sprayed down a little bit and just washed down the debris that was there. I cleaned on the first level, and I just said, pay me what you think it's worth. She paid me $40. It was less than an hour. Honestly, it was probably like 40 minutes. So, um, again, look and see what you're comfortable with and your skills and abilities are. But there's so many things out there where you could be making extra two, three, $500 a month in, on the side in the winter or the summer. So what are things you can write off as a side business? Well, going back, I'm not a tax accountant or a CRA specialist, but there's many, many things. Cell phones, a portion of your food costs when it's used for business discussions. Um, if you're using parts of your house, then you can look at, the electricity and internet and other things when you're using it, like the percentage you're using for business, etc. But I want to ask you an intriguing question. So where did you go on your last trip? Doesn't matter if it was within Canada, if it was outside of Canada, and think about the approximate cost of that trip. And I'm just going to grab some water while you do that. Okay, so I'm seeing answers such as Mexico, Jamaica, cruise in Europe, Asia, and costs. Oh, yeah. So anywhere from a couple $100 within, just going to Regina or Saskatoon. I'm located here in Winnipeg or to Toronto. Some of you are saying 1,500, 3,000, 4,000. So my question for you is, if I had a side business, I'm not saying you will, but could I write off some of those expenses or possibly all of them? Um, the answer is yes. Again, consult with a professional in those areas, but I'll give you an example. I went to Hawaii. My son was going to college there. Rough life, I know. Manitoba, cold winters, Hawaii from September till June. But I went down, and while I was there, I looked at some of the properties for sale. I met with several different realtors and went through several different options, narrowed down, and looked at making offers on some of the properties. And so again, I'm not saying 100% of my trip can be a tax write-off, but there's a portion of that of the expenses I used that I can be using for my uh, business because I have a real estate related side business. And I don't have it in a corporation. It's not some elaborate structure that's difficult. It's on your income taxes when you make less. Again, this all changes. Check with your advisors or professionals, but when you're making, you know, 5, 10, $15,000, then you can include that in your personal income tax. As you increase and make more, then you want to look at getting a corporation and the other side set up. So let's just look at a quick example. So if I'm an employee, then before I get paid, the taxes are going to be taken off. So let's just say it's 22% is the tax bracket I'm in. Minimum is 15%. Well, and so at least in the province I'm in. So 22%, let's just say. So I get that money taken away from me, $220. I have $780 left. And then I have my cell phone, my food, electricity. And this is, I'll just say this is, let's just say this is twice a month, or, you know, whatever your income range is. For many people, that might be, you know, you might be getting $3,000 or $4,000 a month. But in this example, I just kept it simple with numbers. So 780 is take home. During that time, I spend $600. So at the end of that time, the money that I have from my taxes and my expenses is $180 that's in my pocket. If I'm self-employed, then you deduct your expenses and then the rest are taxed. And again, it can be a side hustle or a full-time employment. So let's use that same example where I'd spent $600 on cell phone, food, vehicle, utilities, all things that can be written off if you have a side hustle, or portions of them can be written off. So that's where I got the $600. So that brings it down to 400. Then I have my 22% tax because my income is $400, not 780. And so I have $312. Again, this is a very small, simple example, but let's just say you made 50 or 70,000 through the year. Adjusting for different factors, you know, you could be looking at a difference of $8, $10, $12,000 that might be in your pocket. And so let's just talk a little bit about taxes. Many people say, oh, yes, my house, it's worth 200 or 400 or 600,000. Well, did you know it costs quite a bit more to buy it? When you have a mortgage payment, it costs you $1,220 for $1,000. When you go out and buy a $500 TV, it costs you $610. And most people are like, that doesn't make sense. Because you're paying for a house with after-tax dollars. So you need to be working and making that higher amount. Taxes are taken, and then the remainder is going towards the purchase that you're making. If this concept blows your mind as it did mine when I first started, then we can sit down and look at more examples. But that's where, when we're looking at how money works, this is one major reason why people aren't getting ahead. It's $100 pair of shoes, or it's $75 pair of jeans. Well, if I'm making $15 an hour, it's not 5 or 6 or 7 hours of work to buy that. I also have to account for the tax that's being taken off my income. I also have to account for the taxes that are federal and provincial. So when you add those things up, there's 30-40% that we never even think about. And those are the areas where we're not able to get ahead in Canadian society. So taxes, let's look at food expenses. So some people say, I don't have time for discounts and shopping around and coupons. Yeah, that's a choice. That's up to you. I and a few others I know are extremely good of this area. But, a very simple example, we get coupons every couple of weeks in the mail or through the app. And it's happened multiple times with a friend of mine. We're going somewhere, McDonald's, A&W, etc. I start to pull out the coupon book, it doesn't matter. It's just a few dollars, or, oh, the app's not working right now. I am like, just wait, I need to refresh. No, I'm just going to pay. Well, he ends up paying an extra 7, 10, $12 per meal he eats out uh, multiple times a week. Let's just say 4 times a week. So $40, $50 a week, you know, there's $200 a month. And like I said, I can easily find many people 3 or 5 or $700 in their budget of how they're spending their money currently. Right there with just him using his app, that's $200 a month. And it would take him if he gets into that habit, what, 30 seconds, a minute every time he's going to eat. Anyway, another example, as you've been reading on the screen, I'm sure, bread. So let's just say you're buying 2 loaves a week. I know a few discount stores where it's $2 a loaf. I go to a supermarket, any supermarket, it might be 250, 350, even $4, exact same loaf. I watch the delivery trucks go to the discount store, and then I watch it drive right beside and deliver their bread to the supermarket. So 1 week, $2, 50 weeks, it's $100. Not a big deal. No, it's not a big deal. But think about it, and this, yeah, I changed my numbers earlier, so it's not 40%. I was using different numbers that were lower, and I realized that was from a few years ago when I did this. But so it's not 40%, but the savings is almost 50%. Is that right? Yeah. Um, or let's just say a range between 30 and 50%. And so if you're thinking in terms of percentages, not the dollar amounts, I wouldn't pay 30% more for a house. I wouldn't pay 30% more for a vehicle if I'm seeing it on Kijiji. They're bigger purchases, but we don't make big purchases every week, every month. So when we're looking at those percentages, and I used to work at a store, I won't mention which one, but they had chips and pop. They rotate every 3 to 4 weeks with different price points. So some bags of chips, 1 week would be $1, another week would be $1.50, the other week would be $1.99. And they just rotate through that schedule. People aren't paying attention or don't care. It's a small dollar item. But I would wait for the dollar or $1.25 price, buy multiple bags of chips, and then have those and not buy when it was $1.50 or $2. Again, a couple of dollars, not a big deal, but just think, what are items you buy regularly and how much do they cost in the stores? A second part of this with percentages and dollar amounts, and then also with time. So if I'm coming from the west part of Winnipeg to downtown Winnipeg, for my friend, it takes him 25 minutes to drive that. For myself, it takes 20 minutes. And I'm not speeding, I'm not breaking the laws. I'm just watching the lanes. I'm conscious of which lanes are faster or slower at different times of the days. And so I'm saving 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night. If I multiply that 6 days a week, an hour a week, and 50 weeks a year, that's what blows my mind. I can save a week of my life in driving time just with a couple of minutes a day. Multiply that by 5 and 10 and 20 years. And that's where, when we look at our life and we say, oh, my life's slipping away, or I'm not accomplishing much, or I'm too busy, that's a whole area where we need to be thinking about how are we using our time? Where can we shave off legally and safely a couple of minutes here and there? And how does that affect our overall life? How much is an hour of your time worth? Many teachers get 25 or 30 or $40 an hour in class time, not overall, but 25 times 50 hours, that's $7,500. Nope, $750. You know, 40 dollars an hour at 50 hours a year. So you're basically not just spending more gas time and more wear and tear on your vehicle, but an extra $2,000 a year if you're getting $40 an hour for what you're spending. You know, again, most people say, I don't have enough money. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. Life is hard. Canada, isn't fair. Well, how are you managing and using the resources that you have, time and money? I don't want this to be a lecture, but this is obviously an area you can tell I'm passionate about because it's a few little changes in your daily or weekly, just looking at it from a bird's eye view can result in thousands of dollars in your pocket rather than out of your pocket at the end of each year. So let's take a look at options for mortgage and rent expenses, another major part of your bucket of expenses. So, and I didn't make this as clear, and I don't have check marks, but if I have and make accelerated payments, so instead of paying monthly, I pay bi-weekly, or I pay accelerated bi-weekly, or I put additional payments down, then I can do that with my home. What I mean by rental property is if I'm renting a place, I can't pay the landlord more regularly at a lower cost, but I can accelerate my payments when I own a home. Can I choose a cheaper house? Can I choose a cheaper apartment? Yes. So I can downgrade my lifestyle. And, for some people that have a large amounts of debt, they're struggling. They're better off just selling their house or stop spending 16, 17, 1800 a month in rent and move to a lower rent. And many people say, well, I don't want to live in I don't want to live in this area of town, and that's the only place that has cheap rent. Actually, in many low and medium income places around Winnipeg, rent is the same or more expensive. I can discuss the economics of that in another session, but we were living block from Pembina and Corridon and Osborne, so near Confusion Corner. We were in a 3-bedroom apartment that was being rented to us for $850 and then $900 a month for several years. Yes, I'll agree the rent has now gone up because they did some renovations, but for those years, and you'll see an example of how I reduced costs while we were living there. But think about that, a 3-bedroom apartment for $900. So they are out there in some of the average or a little bit nicer areas. You don't need to be spending, I met a couple and they said, oh, life is so expensive in Canada. The wife is Canadian, the husband is from Eastern Europe. And, oh, it's so expensive in Canada. We have to pay $1,700 a month for rent for a 2-bedroom. I said, no, you don't have to. You're choosing to. I said, along Grant, there's multiple apartments where a 2-bedroom is $1,200 to $1,300. So that $400 a month, that's $5,000 a year that you're spending now. It's where you're choosing. Well, I won't anyway. So what else can we do to reduce our mortgage or our rent? We can have an additional roommate or a homestay student. We can do that when we're owning a home. Can we do that with a rental? Like if we're in an apartment, can we have another person living with us? Okay, I see some of you are saying no, some of you are saying yes. Well, the answer actually is yes. And I know because I've talked with people and I've also done it myself. When we first moved into an apartment in 2017, we had been overseas, came back from Indonesia, and like I mentioned, a 3-bedroom apartment, and we had somebody, we said we only need 2 of the bedrooms, but we want to have another person that's with us. We got everything agreed upon, and we were able to do that. And you'll see in a bit how we save money with that. Also, it's not really reducing our expenses, but if we own a home, we can make some renovations. Let's say you do $10,000 or $20,000 of renovations, that can increase the value of our house, a minimum of the amount you put in. Typically, though, 1.5, sometimes even 2 times. So if I put in 20,000, I could be getting a higher appraisal amount of 30,000 or 40,000 or more, depending on what I renovated. So there's different things that we can do to adjust and decrease our expenses in these areas. Okay, I'm conscious of the time, so I just want to highlight the opportunity cost. Some people say, well, I need a bigger place. Well, when you first are not, if you're in a position where you don't have a lot of money, um, either you need to live in, you should live, I should say, you don't need to, but a lower, an area where the rental or the house prices are a little bit lower initially. So for example, we bought our first house, yes, this was 20 years ago, but we bought our first house for 100,000. As opposed to friends of mine who bought nicer houses that were 260 up to 350. In 2024, 2025, most houses in the different areas I've been around probably you're looking at 240, 250, 350, 400,000 and higher. But if I buy a house at 240,000 versus a house at 350,000, then over several years, I'm going to be paying less in interest payments. And then it's not money that's in my pocket, but it's money that if I had a more expensive house, I would have spent that money. And so that's what we call opportunity cost. I could be using some of the money that I'm not spending with a lower priced house and then be using that money for investment or for other things. In my lifestyle, we used it for travel. I've often said to people, I tried to get my son into 10 different countries by the time he was 10 and we failed, but not by too much. So my son was able to be in 9 different countries by the time he was 10 years old. He's now 20 and he's been in 22 different countries. And again, not because we're wealthy, but we or made hundreds of thousands of dollars every year, but we were looking for ways to save money and increase our expenses. Sorry, increase our income, reduce our expenses, and that allowed us to use those saved monies for travel and for other things that were more educational. So here's examples of what I've done. So 204 to 212, we had a house, as I mentioned, bought it for 100,000. I renovated and fixed it up. I didn't even talk about renovations in this example, but it increased the house value. And then, we had 550 that was our mortgage. Again, fairly inexpensive, but utilities, property tax, and insurance. But we had 2 students that lived with us and went to university. So each of them was paying us $400 for their room and board. Again, 20 years ago. But that means that our total expenses for mortgage and rent was not 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, was not 1125. It was, or 1025, it was 225 a month. So that's where it was 5 times less for us than for our friends or others. And we did this again, as I said, with rent with an apartment. So from 2017 to 2022, for a 3-bedroom, we were paying it started at like 820, then 850, 875, 900, 925. So, it gradually increased. We had electricity, everything else was paid for us there, but we had an income of 750 for renting out a bedroom. So we were paying, we were paying 140 to 175 a month for our mortgage or our rent expense. And yes, there's a cost associated with having someone live with you, but we had people from multiple different cultures. We had one fellow that lived with us for 3 years. So, they became part of our family life and they were similar ages to my son. So my son got exposure to multiple cultures, got used to living with different people and different ways of life and doing things. And it was a win-win, and we were able to help that student with life in Canada, provide a family of support around him, etc. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit faster. I'm just conscious of the time. So vehicle expenses. So common expenses, gas, maintenance, repairs, insurance. So there's something that I dislike because many people say, well, I go and I'm looking at vehicles and this is what the bank or the salesperson or the car dealership says, oh, I can afford a vehicle at this amount. Well, I dislike that thinking, similar with buying a house. Oh, the bank says I have a mortgage for this amount. If you're buying very close to what you can afford, then you have no room for margin or other things. And what I find most frightening, especially with vehicle purchases, is a bank or salesperson or car dealership may say, oh, well, you can afford payments of, $400 a month based on your income. But what I often find in those sheets, because I sometimes like people bring their estimates to me. Oh, should I buy this vehicle, this vehicle? What's not hasn't been calculated is maybe they've put in a minimum amount for gas or maybe some maintenance, oil changes, rotating tires, winter tires, summer tires, etc. But those quotes are usually not accurate or they don't include repairs and or insurance. Um, so don't just think about your purchase price, but think about your ongoing expenses. Similar with a business, you have your startup costs and then you have your ongoing expenses to run that business. Similar with your vehicle. So over my lifetime, I've owned 5 different vehicles, and I'd like to just get your guesses. What was my most expensive vehicle purchase? Okay, so I'm seeing some guesses coming in here. Uh, okay, well, I'll let you know right away that my most expensive vehicle purchase was not D, and there were several guesses for that because that was the highest amount, but it's still lower than most people that I know spend. The other amounts were for 3 of my 5 vehicles. So I bought a vehicle for $4,000 when I was in college. I drove it for 2.5 years, 3 years about, and then I ended up selling it for $2,000. Yeah, I had a few repairs, but they were a couple $100. So for 3 years, that vehicle literally cost me only 2,000 plus my repairs, maintenance, and gas and insurance. I bought a van in 2017 for 4,500. Put on new tires, and I'm still driving that van. We still have access to it, so we've used that vehicle. And then my most expensive purchase was when our son was a baby. I bought a van. I don't know if he remembers it. It was a dark purple. We had it for 5 years. Unfortunately, the transmission went in it, but we drove it for 5 years. It cost us 8,000 plus, and then we had some extra warranty that I had paid for. So my point here is many people say I have to get a brand new vehicle. I have to spend 30, 40, $50,000. And the saddest case I've come across was I we were visiting some people in the hospital. Husband was diagnosed tragically with brain cancer. He was in the last stages of his life. They had been in Canada 3 years. I'm choking up just thinking about it, but his dream had been to buy a vehicle. So they had gone and bought a $50,000 vehicle. And he was working in IT, making good money. But within a few months after getting that vehicle, he was diagnosed with brain cancer. A year later, he was on in the final stages of his life. He passed away. I worked with his widow to just identify and like I went with her through the process of getting payouts from insurance, life insurance, and other things they had. We met with different companies, etc. But I said to her, "You have to get rid of this vehicle," and she said, "I can't." I'm like, "What do you mean you can't?" Well, they had paid 50,000 for the vehicle. The salespeople had added and convinced them all of these extras, most of which were not necessary, but then the loan for that vehicle was $65,000. $65,000. And so they were upside down on a vehicle that now had dropped after only 2 years of her owning it. first year and a half with her husband, and now a few months after without, it was now worth like 32,000, and yet they still owed 60,000 on it. So sad and so unnecessary. If you buy a newer or brand new or almost new vehicle, and you're newer to Canada, or you've been here, you've grown up as a Canadian here, and you don't have a house yet, you've just pushed back the opportunity to buy a house by 3, 5, maybe even 7 years, depending on how you're using the rest of your money. You need to buy a house first if that's one of your goals, and buy a cheaper vehicle, or not use a vehicle. And I've sat down with newcomers, and we figured out, I had one fellow had 3 children. He didn't buy a vehicle for 4 years because he was studying and working, extremely busy person, limited income. But I just analyzed with him, even with 3 children, it was cheaper for him to use Uber and the bus system for himself. And I call it Uber occasionally for his family, live close to a grocery store, etc., than for him to buy a expensive vehicle. And he thanked me when he did buy a vehicle. He bought a vehicle for, I think, 15, 18,000. His kids were now, a little bit older. They had one baby. Uh, I think the other kids were like 3 or 4 and 6 or 7. But for those couple of years, as he saw all of his friends going out and buying vehicles, but he didn't, because he used that money for other things with his family, etc. And then he was able to also purchase a house. So it's life choices, but you're going to get, like, where you're spending your money and how you make those decisions, that affects your flexibility and financial freedom later on in life, or delays it, depending on your situation. Okay, again, opportunity cost. So let's just say conservatively a $10,000 vehicle versus a 25. And I know it says new model, it should say newer model, but there's $200 a month difference, or 2,600 a year. Yes, there's other factors, but this is from a car depreciation calculator, sorry, that's online. So again, if I'm living paycheck to paycheck, I'm better off buying a vehicle that's a little bit less expensive. And so many people say, yeah, but then I have repairs. So what? I have repairs. Like you saw, I'm not spending a lot of money on my vehicle. I know 3 very good mechanics. So it's not that I never have repairs, but I'm looked and calculated the cost. So every year that I'm driving a $5,000 or $10,000 vehicle rather than a $20,000 or $30,000 vehicle, maybe there's one day. Well, with my van in 7 years, I've had 3 days where or 4 days where I haven't been able to use it, and I needed to take a bus or an Uber or bike. Um, so our mind says, oh, but it's inconvenience. Well, yeah, but it's thousands of dollars of inconvenience. It's not like every month your vehicle's breaking down if you know a good mechanic, etc. Okay, so my rant for that is over. Okay, last part of this section, what are some ways to decrease your debts? And again, I know that this has gone for a little bit, but this, I think, is as or more important as we look at our income and expenses, and look at ways to decrease our expenses. So there's 3 main methods that I'm aware of, or there two main methods. There's others, but one is called the snowball payment, the other is called the avalanche. And I'll explain more about the snowball method in the next slide. But the other way to decrease debt is just, again, what are your small regular purchases? Because if I'm just buying stuff on impulse, or thinking, oh, it's a small dollar item, it's those little things that over time get us trapped, in a sense, with spending more than we need. So what is the snowball? Well, so first of all, my encouragement for everyone, write down all of your debts: mortgage, credit cards, line of credit, everything that you owe and everything that you're working with. And have them in front of you, because that's the first step. I have to acknowledge where I'm at. If I don't know that, I have a friend. I've been friends with this fellow for 20 years. He's made most of his career, he's made double my income, and he never has any money. And like I said, for about 8 or 10 years, I also was caught in that rat race and that trap. The last 8 or 9 years, I have not had that issue or problem, because I changed my spending habits and my income. My income didn't increase a lot, but it did increase. Anyway, exists. He doesn't know where his money is going. And so write down what your debts are, write down what you're paying, and what's your plan to pay it off. So with a snowball method, many different people do this. There's two different websites there. One's from Dave Ramsey, one's from another website called Financial Mentor. But you list all of your debts and you start paying your highest interest rate first and just make minimum payments on your other debts. Once the highest debt's been paid off, you don't stop paying. You combine what you were paying on that debt that's now gone. So let's just say it was $30 a month. And then you add it to the next highest interest rate and you pay with that increased amount above minimum payments. And then slowly you're working your way down from highest interest rate to lowest interest rate. So for example, credit card, 5,000, 18%. I'm not going to go through all these numbers, but you can see there's these multiple debts with high and low interest rates. So I look at the $5,000. I am making monthly payments of 150. I add some extra money to that payment. Let's just say $50 or $100. And then I make those payments until I can get that paid off. Then I take that, let's say it was $200, I take that and I apply all of that to the home theater balance that was owing. So now I'm paying 125 minimum payment plus the 200 that I was paying on the credit card. So I'm able to pay it not from 29 months, but maybe that now takes me, um, 8 months or 13 months. So I keep adding, and it's like a snowball rolling down the hill. I increase the amounts I'm paying towards one debt, and then when it's paid off, I take all of that money and start paying the next debt until I work my way through. I think I mentioned last session, I didn't have a credit card for a number of years because I had $30,000 or $40,000 in credit card debt, and it was overwhelming at 12, 18, 30% per year. So for many years, I did not use a credit card at all. Starting in 2018, 2019, I got a secured credit card, meaning I put money in the bank and then they released a credit card for that amount. I think it was $500 or $1,000. A couple of years later, my credit rating was better, so I was able to get my own credit cards. And now it's just in the last year, other than our mortgage, which we've had for 3 years, other than our mortgage, it's not even last year. I think in the last 3 months, I actually have a line of credit and I have access to a second line of credit, but I've only borrowed money from a line credit in the last 2 years out of the last 14 or 15 years. So I had many of these things. I had credit card debts. I had a vehicle loan. I had other things 15 years ago. I rearranged my finances, got rid of credit cards for me for a while till I could manage and control them. And now I'm slowly having them. But I borrowed that money from this personal line of credit because I actually turned around and invested it at actually 4 times the interest rate. So I got an introductory rate of 12%. And sorry, I banged the table and brought the camera. I got an entry rate of 3%, which will go up to, I think it's 7% after the first 3 months. But I put it into an investment as a private loan in real estate where I'm getting several percent higher than that amount. So I'm not even using it to purchase a home theater or something that decreases in value. I've actually pulled money from a loan and a personal line of credit and a lower interest rate, and I haven't invested at a higher interest rate. And I'm not leveraging that with 100% of my money. That's a very small portion of money that I have available. So that's why I'm comfortable with that. So even if there's an issue and I don't get that money paid back to me from this investment initially, I still have money to cover those payments. The avalanche method, I'll just go up here. The avalanche method is similar to the snowball method, but instead of paying the highest interest rate, you start paying off the largest amount or biggest debt outside of your mortgage. So in this example, you would start paying the vehicle loan first. The reason why both are effective, both mathematically have similar results, the biggest thing is many people recommend the snowball method because people see results quicker. So when you're paying off the highest interest rate, you're able to get rid of that quicker, and then you go to the next one, the next one. Um, there is also another method where you pay your lowest debt first, so you get it off your books, and then go to the next one, next one. Anyway, there's different methods. The point is you need a method to be paying off your credit card debt. I said last session, if you have 10,000 or more money owing outside of your mortgage, so you have your mortgage and then you have these other debts that are 10, 12, 15, 20,000, 95% of people that I've worked with or that I know, they can't get out of debt on their own because they're not having good money habits. They need to have somebody sit down with them and coach them through. It might only take an hour, it might take 20 hours, but they need to be sit down with somebody and um, organize a plan and know where their money's going. So let me give you some excuses, but I don't know how to invest in stocks. I don't know how to increase my income. I don't know how to, repair toilets. But it's only $5. This third one, I gave this to a group of newcomers, gave the example of buying bread, and right away one student said, "But Mr. Trevor, I don't eat bread." I'm like, "Yes, okay. Do you eat rice? Do you eat vegetables? Like what else?" Because it's the principle, it's not the idea. And this person was a very concrete thinker. So, oh, I don't eat bread, so that doesn't, that principle doesn't apply to me. Um, it's the principle. Where are you spending money and the percentage? I don't want to go to another store for $2. I don't either, and I don't. You're looking at these different expenses. If you know the prices of different things at different stores, and it doesn't have to be much, just the things you're knowing regularly that you buy. For myself, we go to 3 different stores, but not every time and not every week. I just know, okay, I have enough of this, and so I'll wait until, um, I'll wait to buy that maybe in 3 days or a week or 2 weeks when I'm going to that other store because I know it's cheaper there. Quick example, we are looking at buying soap. We have 2 homestay students. Um, some homestay programs say that the homestay family provides, some say that uh, the individual student has to pay for their own shampoo and soap. In our household, we just have a bunch of toilet paper and soap and Kleenex, etc. So I was looking and I was like, oh, at the store I was at, it was like $12.99 for a 10 pack. I'm like, that seems pricey. I thought last time I bought it was cheaper. Looked around without being on sale at another store, it was $9.99, $9.99, yeah. So $3 cheaper, 30% cheaper, 25% cheaper, but same brand, same size, everything was exactly the same. So, and I didn't just buy, a 10 pack of soap then. I actually bought 4 bundles of that. Because the other thing that irritates me, because I know how they're wasting time and money, I watch people walk into Safeway, Walmart, Superstore, major big stores, and they come out with one item. I'm like, what? I know if you need something, but it's just become too easy. Oh, I need milk. I'll run in and grab milk. Take a few minutes to plan out, go in and buy 8, 10, 12, 20 items or multiples of things that are on sale, and then store them. Again, little amounts, but for most people I know that could add up into hundreds, and most people actually it's thousands, two, three, $4,000 a year just by changing your habits. I don't want to fix toilets at midnight, neither do I, and I don't. I want a nice house and a nice car. Again, lifestyle choice, up to you, but you're delaying your retirement and or your stress level and peace of mind. I can have a nice house and a nice car and then work for 20, 30 years to be paying it off, or I can buy something that's a little bit less for a shorter time, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and then get something that's nicer. My spouse doesn't agree with me. I'm not going to, this is another whole workshop that I do, but on relationships and finance and money. But that can be a big one when you're not in agreement. But I have kids. Again, so did I. I mean, I grew up, um, yeah, and I grew up in an environment with, in my family, and then I have my own family. But I taught my son these principles, and his money style is a little bit different than mine. So is my wife's. We have different money personalities, they're called, but we still are conscious and evaluate when we're purchasing and spending things. And we don't live cheaply. I mean, there's some areas I don't spend a lot of money on, but mattresses, shoes, but like shoes, um, my son grew up with Adidas and Nikes, but we got them secondhand and usually paid 20 to $40 for them, not 150. And especially, as kids are growing out of clothes and shoes every year or 2 years, and sometimes every 6 months. So over the years, he kept the fashion trends, and he is a very fashionable dresser, but without that high cost, high maintenance of those costs. Because he wasn't buying brand new. He was okay with something that we would find that somebody had worn once or twice or maybe 5 times, but it was still in excellent shape at much lower cost. Other excuses, I don't know how, or I don't have the knowledge, Mr. Trevor, that you have. I've spent, because I was I'm I was frustrated with myself being in debt, and I was also frustrated with watching many other people kind of waste money in a sense. I've lived overseas in several different countries, especially countries that have a lot of people living on $1 or $2 or $3 a day. Come back to North America, so I was in different financial systems in different countries, and realize, there's just a lot of waste in my life, how I was spending money in debts and paying other people and not myself and my family. I started to learn. Here's a whole list of authors. Some are motivational, some are specifically about debt or money. David Bach became famous. He now has like 8 or 10 books or more, but the latte factor was huge, about just how the little amounts that we're spending at Starbucks or Tim Hortons or others, how that adds up. Money personalities, first comes love, then comes money. Dave Ramsey, Gail Vax Oxlade. So Dave Ramsey is fairly popular in radio and TV and internet in the US. Gail Vax Oxlade is a Canadian, Jamaican Canadian, and I'm saying that because that's what it's on Wikipedia and her website profile. But um, she's teaches about money and debt and finances, etc. And then some of these are more motivational speakers, mindset speakers. Um, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And many people might not recognize the last two names, Thomas Stanley and Morgan Housel. Thomas Stanley was fairly famous because I think it was in the 80s or 90s, he wrote a book or co-authored a book called The Millionaire Next Door. Just what are the stereotypes we have about people who are millionaires and how most of them are wrong. Very fascinating book, because many people around us may be millionaires, but they have money habits and ways of looking at the world that is similar to what I've explained to you here, and is just a different, it's not the consumeristic, way of life that many people in our society have. And then Morgan Housel, it's funny because I only read parts of his book, and it's been many years. Um, but I've seen it come up so many times in the last 10, 15, 20 years. Multiple people, some very famous, have recommended his book as a must read if you're learning about finances and money, because his book is titled The Psychology of Money. Fascinating book from that. Okay. I just want to go through a couple of other principles and ideas and then end off. So low, middle income, usually there's the mindset, as we looked at famous quotes that are actually now outdated. But that was in the first session, but go to school, um, get a good job, earn a salary, work hard, save your money, and it's thinking about yourself and doing everything. I have my job, I have my house, and my time, I'm earning dollars with my time. Those that have high income, they have a business, they're working smarter, they're using systems and technology, they have leverage, and they often have passive income. So they might own multiple businesses. They might use other people's times by hiring people. This third one, this is something that for my wife and I, it wasn't a spoken goal, but it is something that we have, that we just didn't spend all that we were earning. And so I think I mentioned it last year, or last session, but um, over 5 years, we saved up $80,000, and our income between the two of us combined was some years 30,000, 35, 40, and up to 50,000 over those years. So because we were living on 25 to 30,000 a year and making 30 or 35 or 40 or 45,000 a year, that extra money we saved up. So we now have multiple months in savings that we can access if either of us have issues or problems or can't work for a period of time. So again, stocks, properties. I always tell the classes when I'm teaching with newcomers, many of you are struggling to buy your first house. Your goal should be to buy 4 houses in the next 10 years, not one by one, but 4 houses you own. Or if you gather together a large amount of money, 300, 400, 500,000, then consider buying a commercial property. But have the mindset, I'm not just working to try and get my first house, I'm going to own multiple properties, and what are the steps for me to get there. So again, we usually have a job from others or from work, part-time or full-time. That money goes into our expenses. And this is for those with those that are surviving and struggling and not using their money well, but because that money is being spent on liabilities, big TVs, cell phone, stereo. Some cultures I've been in, very modest house, or you could say a low income house, but they have multiple motorbikes and they have a huge TV when you first walk in. It's not wrong. It's just the priorities of what they're looking at in their society and what society says is socially important. Middle class, we often have a job, and then we have our money, and you can see I have the arrows in yellow, and that money often is still going to house and possessions, but we might start to have we don't have assets yet, because you'll notice here, house and vehicle. Remember the definition of last session? Uh, Liability is something that takes money away from you. Many people say, well, I have a nice watch, or I have golf clubs, or I have coin collection, and I have my vehicle, and I have my house. And the bank says, oh, you have all these assets. But they're not assets because you can't sell them very quickly, and or the value of them is would be lower if you had to sell it at a quick. And houses take money away from you, vehicles take money away from you. So high financially in IQ people are those that have that are moving towards becoming financially free or with passive income. They have money from their job or business and from assets that's coming in that used to pay their expenses, that's used to pay their main liabilities, but their business, real estate, stocks, commodities, etc., brings in more money. And so once your assets produce more money than your income, that's when you're financially free, because you don't have to be working in order to be making money. So how about you? What sources of income do you have? What are your expenses? And do you have liabilities only, or do you have some assets that are also starting to feed money, even if it's just a little bit? Like I showed you with the mortgage or rent, we had a student or students that were paying a bit of money into our pockets. They weren't assets in the strict definition, but it was reducing our expenses to be able to then save up more money that allowed us to buy a property. And I mentioned I often have in my when I file my income tax, I don't have any corporations, but I have two side businesses. One is with tutoring, one is with more physical work, renovations, lawn mowing, etc. So as I make income from either of those, I put them into the appropriate categories, look at the expenses that are CRA approved, and use that as a way of increasing my income, reducing my debts. So as we conclude, most people don't understand money, so they don't have a plan, and then they don't have realistic goals. So what's your plan? Not to increase your money, but increase your financial IQ first, knowledge, understanding your network, etc. What are the goals you have? What is your plan to reach your goals? And then where do you want to be in 5 years? Just surviving, maintaining where you're at, but just kind of in that middle zone, which is fine. That's can be comfortable. Um, or do you want to be thriving where you're increasing your net worth year after year after year? Should I increase my net worth by cutting my expenses or increasing my income? Both. That's where in our society it's often dualistic, this or that. Instead, we should say and. Start cutting your expenses and increasing your income. You'd be surprised in 6 months or a year what difference that can make in your net worth, and you'll feel more confident about money and confident about yourself by having that knowledge. Okay, so there are other slides and things here that we can talk about, but where it's more of a review. So I think that I'll just end off there, but keep in mind, know your income, know your expenses, identify your money personality, and then start making those changes so that you're not just surviving, but you're maintaining and or thriving over the next several years. I can be reached through TESL Manitoba and or other avenues. I love talking about this, as you can probably tell, and I'd be very willing to share and to sit down with people individually or in small groups for 20, 30, 45 minutes and help them just analyze where they at currently and what changes that they make. And there'll be other workshops that I'll providing um, about some of these other things, like how to increase your income specifically in your situation. I can do that in a class with multiple people. Looking at real estate options. What are the different ways to invest in real estate, not just in the actual properties, but in private lending, REITs, using your RRSPs for real estate investments, etc. And then helping people find ways to reduce their expenses. So thank you for participating and being here this whole time. And if you have other questions, feel free to be in touch or reach out. I hope you have a great weekend and look forward to talking with you about some of these areas.